I think there's kind of two kinds of people. There's people who want to work for themselves and be the leader, and there's people who want to like work for someone else and be a follower. And it's not good or bad. It just is. There's some people just don't want to worry when they go home at night about, are you going to make payroll or not, or whatever the worry is going to be. Everyone can't be running the show. Only, one person can, or a couple people can. So I think that if you know what people's places are, then it's easier to manage them. It's easier to do it. The worst is someone who shouldn't be leading, who wants to be leading and isn't ready to lead, because those people, present an issue.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Matthews Mentality Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Matthews. I'm announcing myself today. And today we are joined by Brad Hutensky, a seasoned leader in the real estate industry, founder and CEO of Hutensky Capital Partners. He oversees all facets of the company's investment and asset management activities. Hutensky Capital Partners have been a fund manager for over 15 years, 2 million square feet, currently over 30 million total square feet of assets purchased and sold into the multiple billions, 200 retail properties in 29 states. That is a lot of experience, a big portfolio. Brad, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today.
I feel like you've set the bar kind of high with that introduction, but hopefully I'm up for it.
It's when you're in sales for as long as I have. I actually got great sleep last night. We're in. I should let the audience know we're at the ICSC show in Las Vegas. So if you hear some background noise, we were fortunate enough to have Brad and a couple other guests on. I think this is our fourth show, but it's not often you go to Vegas and you get better sleep. But when you got 4 little kids at home, you come out here. If my wife listens to this, she's gonna be jealous. But I got great sleep last night. Took it early. How about you?
I'm still in the hitting the bar late at night, trying to meet more people. So my sleep was not as good as yours.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
But I've played hurt for a long time, so it's not a problem.
You played hurt. That's a good one. What's a day in the life for Brad look like these days?
I get up every morning. I go downstairs. I exercise. Try to do that 7 days a week. I just feel like it sets your body right and sets your mind right.
Has that been something you've done your whole career, or is that a more recent focus?
I think I do more of it now. I mean, I've always been active, but when you get older, you'll realize that certain parts you can't exercise. You can't run, for instance. It's harder to run, whatever. So now you're doing, I do weights a couple days, do the Peloton bike and that kind of thing. And, when you have a wife that's younger than you, you need to stay young.
You got to keep up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really have, I have a long-term contract, but she has a 1-day termination right at any point in time.
Yeah, she's on a month-to-month agreement.
Exactly. It's day-to-day.
Day-to-day agreement.
And I wake up every morning and find out if I'm still in.
I like to ask a question about working out, because at every company, especially you have new hires, young hires. Certainly at Matthews, we have a lot of them. And in their 20s, we talk all the time about now's the time to grind and work long hours on the weekends and create momentum in their career and all that. It's part of the reason a lot of our audience is in this demographic. But and they'll ask me the question, like, how do I fit in, the gym, right? And health. And I guess the good news is most of them, they're not necessarily, they don't have kids and a lot of other commitments. But when we have guests like yourself on, a very accomplished guest, I do like to ask the question, in your 20s, I assume, and we'll dive into that, but I assume, you were working long hours of weekends, but did you find time to exercise as well?
I mean, I always found time, but I think now it's just a part of my life. I couldn't see not working out. I mean, rarely do I go 2 days without working out.
Got it.
And I just feel it's more a part of my life. But, as you get older, it just, you make it part of your routine. But I do it first thing in the morning. If I don't do it first thing in the morning, it's not going to happen. And so that's what I.
And I also feel culturally, physical health and well-being is more a thing now than maybe 20, 30 years ago, Yeah,
I think people are more aware, but there is totally a connection between how you feel about yourself and how you feel physically and your ability to perform.
Absolutely. I agree. So let's talk about back in the day. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay.
And despite that, I hope to be successful.
That's pretty funny. Parents, what'd they do?
So my dad was a lawyer, and he decided that he was going to become a real estate developer. So he left law, and he built the tallest building in Hartford, 38 stories, 1.2 million square feet. And he left law to do that. And he never looked back. But he was a great entrepreneur, but he wasn't necessarily a good businessman. He could negotiate a great deal, but putting lots of deals together is different than just negotiating one.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a different part of your brain, I would argue. Do you, in your opinion, is that what ultimately was that a big driver or a big determinant on you getting into real estate?
So I had 3 jobs early on that made a difference. The first one, when I was 14, I worked at a shopping center, mowing the lawn and picking up the trash and cutting the weeds. And that was certainly hands-on, and I understood the difficulty of that. I would advise people not to work when you're 14, to wait as long as possible. And then I was a waiter at a restaurant, and that was it was a delicatessen, and you would have a huge turnover. So you would have 15 tables at once and carry the plates up the arm, and it was really hard work. But at every table, I was going to do the best I could. I figured out everyone's going to give you a tip, but you can get a great tip if you really do well. So like a guy came in and said, I want corned beef on white bread with mayonnaise. And I said, sir, this is a Jewish delicatessen. We can't serve you that. We'll put it on rye bread with mustard, and if you don't like it, it's on me. And he loved it. He was happy. He gave me a big tip. So that was a good performance thing. And the third job I had, where I really started working, I was editor-in-chief of the newspaper at Dartmouth, daily newspaper, smallest college in the country has a daily newspaper. And one of the things, so I used to write the editorial every day. And one time there was a class I was taking, and the other newspaper came in and recorded every word that everyone said in that class. And I wrote an editorial saying, I'm for free speech, but I don't think everything you say in a class should be recorded. And so the guy came over, interviewed me, and the next time they came out, there was my freshman year picture and a story that said why Brad Hutensky lied, that I lied about this whole thing that happened because I wanted to get a good grade in the class. Nice. And what that teaches you is about the press and how that works, and also that sometimes you have to stand up for what you believe, even if it's not popular.
No, yeah, keep going.
No, I think I'll end there.
And so, mowing lawns, working at the delicatessen, was that something that you chose to do? Was that something your parents like, hey, you have to get a job, that this is just the expectations in the family?
It was clear I was getting a job. It was clear that that you work, in this family, and if you want spending money and that kind of thing, you're going to earn it yourself, and that's a good lesson, and I would tell my kids to do the same thing. Getting handed stuff is very different than earning it yourself. Mm-hmm. Don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know anyone who would argue with that. It's when you earn something, there's so much more satisfaction, fulfillment,
right,
when you receive it.
So now, come out of college. And I'd say, I want to get in real estate. And maybe it was my father, maybe it wasn't. I just decided that's what I want to do. I get this job for a real estate syndicator in Boston. And I was working 100 hours a week, just like an investment bank, doing all these kinds of things. But what I learned over those 2 years was a lot about numbers and how numbers work and how you can make the numbers do whatever you want them to do. And, what I always say is, I'll buy it whatever cap rate you want if I get to adjust the NOI. So one of my favorite stories there, I'm working with this guy, and at the time, he didn't understand the numbers at all. And he said, we're running a 10-year deal on an office building that they're going to syndicate. And he says, the IRR went from 14.12 to 14.10. What do you think caused that? I said, Mike, you're kidding, right? I mean, it's going out 10 years. You're predicting for the next 10 years, every year, what the income's going to be, what the expenses will be, how much you're going to sell it for, and exactly. And you're talking about 2 basis points? He says, yeah, I know all that. But why do you think it happened? So I thought for a second. I said, lease rollover in year 7. And he bought it. He said, okay, I understand. But he didn't understand the numbers. And in your business, you can make the numbers do what you want.
Yeah, and a model is only as good as the assumptions. And the assumptions, as much as you need to be able to defend them, they're really, at best, educated guesses, right?
Right, but they have to be believable and manageable.
And defendable, yeah.
Right. And you have to know what are the assumptions that really make your model move in a direction and which are the ones that don't really matter. Like people talk about vacancy, and they said, well, we have 10% vacancy, but we've excluded 90% of the tenants because they're credit. Well, that's not really much vacancy in that case. But it sounds good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Were you a good student as a kid? Like high school?
Yeah, I was good, but I was able to do everything at the last minute. I never studied for the test for 2 weeks before. I kind of did everything at the last minute. And, that's kind of the way life is. Often you don't have time to prepare. Yeah. And sometimes you just need to do it the best you can with the time that you have.
Or you're like me when you have time to prepare and you still wait to the last minute.
That's me. I'm totally in that position.
Did you sports as a kid?
Yeah, I played hockey. I golfed, and I played lacrosse.
And so, I'm at Dartmouth. It's a great school. Was that always where you wanted to go? What was that process like?
So we had a rule in my family that was my mail when the college acceptances came. And my mother totally agreed. And I get home one day, and the Dartmouth acceptance is taped to the front door. She had obviously gone through my mail.
Yeah.
And I went up there, and it was a beautiful day, and I fell in love with the school. I'd never been up there when I got in. But I had golf practice. So I made my mom drive 75 miles an hour back from Hanover back to West Hartford in order so I could go to golf practice. So I was like, yeah, this is great. Let's go. And I loved it. I had a great time there. I went there on a beer pong scholarship. So I was playing beer pong in the basement.
So you're pretty good.
And that's how I, worked my way through school.
Yeah. Yeah. A little Beirut. Do you still golf? Still golfing?
Yeah, I love golf.
Yeah. What's your handicap?
Right now I'm a 16. I'm the worst golfer in my family. And they don't give me strokes either.
Really?
But, I love it. It's being out there people
Yeah.
you like. And, it's beautiful. And, I was a lot better when I played a lot. But now, the whole work thing gets in the way. And
The damn work thing.
Yeah.
And so you go to Dartmouth. What'd you major in when you were up there?
Economics. Because you didn't have to write any papers. They're just a midterm and a final. So I thought that was a better way to go.
But you had mentioned earlier you were active in the student newspaper.
Yeah.
How'd that happen? Because economics, you don't have to write papers, so it sounds like you maybe had an aversion to writing, but then you end up at the student newspaper.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great experience, but I kind of thought, like, when am I ever going to be editor-in-chief of a daily newspaper? It's never going to happen again because I'm not going to make my career. And what ended up happening was, we used to go in 12 noon or 1 after our classes, work all day, get the paper together. And then this guy used to come at midnight, and he'd take what we wrote, and he'd put it into plates, and then he'd bring it down to the press. And 6 a.m, he distributed around the town. And beginning of my senior year, that guy had a heart attack, and suddenly he wasn't there anymore. So I stopped taking classes. I had enough credits and all, and I stopped taking classes, and I basically did that job for a couple weeks until somebody got it. So I was basically working full time in the newspaper at that point.
So you're at Dartmouth. Again, are you set? Okay, I'm an economics major, and I'm going to get into real estate as I graduate. Was that where your head was at the time?
I think your first couple years, you're not thinking about that. You think you're going to be in college forever. You're never going to end, and you just want to, enjoy the experience. And then, towards the end, I got serious about my studies. I realized I wasn't going to graduate with honors. So I got a 4.0 my senior year in every single class I took just to barely get there. And by the way, I'm the 4 Hutenskys have gone to Dartmouth. I'm the lowest of all of them. Great point. My 2 sons were both better.
I think they call that a value add
And my
opportunity.
brother- Exactly.
Right?
But the time I graduated, I was number 1 because I was the first one. So
There you
let's
go.
just say that. But I quickly dropped. I'm off the medal stand now.
And sorry, were there 4 siblings in your family?
Two children. So it's my 2 sons both went, and my brother went.
Okay, I got you. So when you grew up, you and your brother? Did you have a sister? Or?
So it's kind of interesting. I had a sister, and she now lives in Bologna, Italy. But my father had a very good friend who, on his deathbed, my dad said he'd take care of his 3 kids, and they're from Ethiopia. So I have 2 sisters and a brother in addition to my
That you
direct ones.
grew up with.
And they're now like at Thanksgiving, we're all together as a family and we're there.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it is nice.
Very different, very different and non-traditional in that sense.
Well,
but sounds cool.
The interesting thing is, you think of the sacrifice my dad made, which was not just help people, but literally make them part of your family.
Yeah.
It was quite a thing. I don't know that I'll ever do anything like that in my life. That's so giving to other people.
Oh, yeah, geez, that's a. When did that happen? How old were you?
That happened just after I graduated college.
Okay.
So it was, but I was very friendly with the guy and all that. It just kind of I don't know. Like I said, it's great. My dad put them all through college, and brought them down the aisle in their wedding, and
awesome.
whatever. And it's nice having a bigger family.
Obviously, and we'll get into and cover all of the accomplishments on the professional side. But how do you think your parents would describe you as a kid? Was it something that they saw what they kind of saw it at an early age? Like, were you driven, focused, achievement oriented, or how would they describe you growing up?
I think they'd say I was I was driven to succeed, but I wouldn't say like I had a lot of. I mean, I had good natural talent, so it seemed like if I worked hard, I'd get good results. In most things. I think that with every kid is different. Same genetics, same socialization, and they're totally different.
They're totally
And
different.
I know my two kids are different, so I was different than my brother and sister, in many ways. And there's a birth order thing. I really do believe in that.
Yeah, that definitely has a big part. And to what you're saying earlier, some of it's just the wiring. They come out.
But I think your parents are an example for you and like what they do and how they treat things. And, we'll get to it, but I was very lucky to work with my father for 20 years. And, seeing them, their example and what they do and what they don't do, their frailties. I mean, you get to a point in the beginning, you think your parents are perfect. And then over time, you realize they're human beings just like us.
And that's crazy, huh? When you realize, like, wait, they don't know everything? Like, wow.
My boys are 23 and 26. I hope they haven't figured that out about me
No.
yet, but I'm sure they have.
No, I think my kids still think I have magic powers, and I'm gonna hold that over their head for a while. You graduate from Dartmouth, did you? And then you went to Harvard to go get your master's. Did that happen right away? Was there?
No, I worked for the syndication for 2
Okay.
years. And, what happened when the first year was great, big analyst class, and Reagan announced that he was changing the tax law.
Yeah.
And that ended the syndication business because it was all built on getting 5-to-1 losses. So no one ever had any money in any deals. And when that ended, they actually fired all the other analysts except me, and they shipped me down to New York City to lease office space for them because they had some office projects. And, leasing space is hard. Being in New York is hard, and doing both of those together for someone who'd never done it. That
Yeah,
was pretty
and
cool.
at that period of time, right? Because the economy was slow. 87 was the crash. Was that September, October?
I'm much older than that, just so you know. So.
Yeah, fair enough. But it says 86 to 88, so there was a lot going on at a macro level in the U.S. And
Absolutely. Yeah, but it was, the New York office brokers were all making $1 million a year then, and they were aggressive, and they saw, fresh meat when they saw me there representing the owner, and that they could outmaneuver me. So, you had to get smart really quickly. And I'm sure you know that some of your best experiences is trial by fire, when
course,
somebody's put you in a
absolutely,
situation.
yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that. And it was, there were big deals, there were expensive deals, some of the best brokers in the country, frankly, I was dealing with. And I learned real quick.
And you did that, and then was there a moment where you said, I want to go back and go get a master's, or was that always part of the plan?
What happened was, to be honest with you, the chairman of the company was like, if you don't go to Harvard finishing school, you're not anything. And so then I applied and I got in, and he was like, you shouldn't go, you should stay here, So I don't know. I thought it was an experience that I wanted. I thought it was a generalization. I think in many ways, it allows you to pivot to whatever business you want, or even within real estate, whatever part of the business you want, because you have that background, that training, and most importantly, the relationships. The people I met there were over 800 people in my class. I met some people who are doing incredible things these days.
I was talking to someone, I think on this podcast, Zach, and I asked him that question. I said, is it the technical and professional skills you learn is the value? And it doesn't have to be either this or that. I'm sure it's both. Or is it really the relationships? And the answer, if I'm not mistaken, was like, certainly the skills are important and, the case studies, but he's like, the relationships is that's.
Well, the worst thing they do, though, is that you do these cases, like you're chairman of Ford Motor Company, and like, should you close these 5 plants or not? And that's like 1,000,000 miles away from where you are when you start your career. You're not CEO.
No, you're not making those decisions.
But you do case studies, so you think that you actually know something about anything. But the most interesting thing one of the most interesting was the speakers who came. When I was there, Mike Milken, Steve Jobs, like one after the every day. And I went to
super
see all those
fascinating
speakers,
people.
Incredible people. And, Mike Milken had the Madonna song, Material Girl, changed it to I'm a double B girl because he was junk bonds. Right?
Yeah.
And it was just incredible. And he had this whole stage thing, whatever. So seeing those kinds of people and hearing their ideas, hearing their stories, that was really fascinating too.
And did you continue your, I guess, involvement in student newspapers and writing?
I was president of the real estate club with Steve Lebovitz. If
Wow.
you know him, from
CBL. No,
so
sure.
we were buddies there. And
He's a great guy.
Yeah, exactly. And so, those are the people you come in contact with and you meet. And in fact, my first ICSC was 1988. Steve and I came out here and we played tennis because we had nothing to do. We had no meetings or anything.
Yeah.
And that was my first one.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And so, but real estate club, no writing or anything like that.
You had I couldn't find courses where I didn't have to do writing, so I did writing for
So
my
you
courses.
got it. Okay.
They caught up to me.
How'd you do in business school? You do all right? Because it sounds like you were peaking towards the end of your undergrad, right? 4.0 your last semester. Did you carry that focus and discipline into the master's?
I would say I picked and choose the things that really interest me, and I work really hard. Like I took a capital markets class that was taught by this guy David Mullins, who became vice chairman of the Fed, and was an incredibly smart guy, very demanding, and I worked really hard for him, and I ended up getting a good grade, but basically because it really interested me, even though it's not what I do. It wasn't capital markets like shopping centers, whatever. It was the how all the markets move and the Black-Scholes model and all that kind of thing. And it was a lot of stuff I knew nothing about. And guys in investment banking for 2 years, that's all they did the whole time. And, I did well in that because I was really interested. And the guy kind of scared me a little bit, to be honest with you. He was that kind of guy. He'd walk into the class. Well, so Harvard, half your participation is grade, half your grade is grade participation. So they come in and they, Mr. Matthews, what do you think about this case? And you're like, you got to answer in front of the whole class and talk and say what you think. So that part was good. It's the speaking part, and then half of it was your exams. So, but this guy was just, he could scare you, just by the way he conducted things. It was kind of like
his demeanor,
paper chase, boy, Mr. Matthews, that kind of thing. That was what he's like. So it was great. School. It was great, but he was so smart and knew everything that you just couldn't. I remember one time he said there was a class about. They're talking about Radio Shack. And he goes, what do they sell at Radio Shack? I go, schlock. He goes, well, how do you spell that? And then he started going into that and talking about it. So that was the thing. It was exercising your mind. It was challenging your mind, and there were smart people there who would ask you things. But it was a good experience.
So you graduate, and then what are you going to do?
So, it was a key point in my life because I said, you know what? I could go do real estate in North Dakota and no one would know me, and I would know that every single thing I did, Brad Hutensky produced, and I would never have to look back. Or I could go back to Hartford, Connecticut, where my dad is like the man in town, and everyone say you're Alan Hutensky's son. And what do I want to do? And I basically decided that I'd be better off going to Hartford, and it was my problem if I couldn't take being Alan Hutensky's son, or people were going to say that to me. That was my shortcoming, and that I should take advantage of this opportunity to work with him and to work in his business and not be so insecure that I'd go someplace where I was doing it on my own. And that was kind of a key crossroads.
Yeah, that's a mature process to run at 22.
26 then, right?
Excuse me, 26, yeah, forgive me.
But it was still, it was introspective is the thing, because you have to say, who am I? What am I about? Am I so insecure that I want to go someplace where I know I did it all myself? I mean, with my dad, we'll get to it. I think at some point it was me more than him, but in the beginning it was him more than me. And was I okay with that? Was I okay being his son? Every time someone seen him, they thought just because of my last name, that's why I was in this position.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir. I couldn't inherit my dad's business, obviously, but I've had, Matthew's a big name, so I've had to process similar feelings and emotions, and just is what it is, right? Now, you had mentioned earlier your dad's, maybe it's a foray into real estate, was going from being an attorney and building this big high-rise office. Obviously, your experience being so rich in retail is, by the time you joined your dad, was he in the retail business, or?
He was in every business. He was in retail. He was doing low-income housing. He was doing golf course communities in Florida. He was doing industrial, doing office. And the very first day I got there, we went out to dinner, and I said, Dad, what's like the strategy of the company? We're doing all these things. What's the strategy? And he said, to make money. And I said, well, okay, but you got these 100 people here, whatever, and when they get in every morning, they need to know what they have to do, like what are their goals, what are they trying to get? Can you be more specific than just make money for me? I'm like, okay. And so then we had the whole thing about the Harvard Business School guy, because he said that every time I said something like, well, maybe that's what they do at Harvard Business School, but that's not the way we do it here.
I was going to say, you're fresh out the B school with all these ideas, and he's like, okay, kid,
But what I'm saying is he was an amazing I'll give you an example. So he negotiated a lease and had this CAM clause that was, 5 pages long that had CPI increases and all this other stuff. But the problem is people in the accounting department couldn't exercise it. They couldn't make it happen. You would be better off just saying $3 a foot, because then they'll get it right all the time. So he was a great negotiator, but he, I don't know that he was good at stringing a lot of deals together and thinking about how that worked. So it's very different running a business than doing deals. That's my point. If you can do both, that's great. But a lot of real estate people are deal makers more than business people, which is different. It's not good or bad. It's just different. But if you do deals that are so good, then that's okay. But if you get to the point where putting all the deals together creates a better business, then that's a business.
And I had on my notes 1989, founded, became a partner at Hutensky Capital Partners. Is this kind of a joint venture with your dad, or?
No. So, when my dad was there, like I said, what I did is we went from doing everything to focusing mainly on retail, and as it turns out, maybe I should have picked industrial or something else, one of the other things, but that's a different story.
I think we all should have picked industrial.
So
really in the last 10 years, I would say.
Right. But so we focused the business and we focused on retail. We did a lot of third-party work with the insurance companies in Hartford and banks and that kind of thing through the RTC years. And then in 2006, I had this idea that in a capital-intensive business, having capital would be a good thing. So that's when I started raising the funds. And that was really my business. My dad never really understood that business. When we raised our first fund, was like $100 million. He said, like, great, we have $100 million. I'm like, Dad, it doesn't quite work that way. Like, we're a fiduciary and, like, we need to invest smartly and all that.
Yeah, we told him we were going to do something with the money. We have to do it.
Exactly.
What was the catalyst to raising the first fund? Like, what was, I could guess what the motivation was, obviously, but that's a big leap, right? Especially for a company or platform that hadn't done that in the past.
Well, we had been doing a lot of JVs, so we knew how to invest and we were investing, but we didn't have discretionary money. So that's the advantage. Mm-hmm. The disadvantage is you have to do a ton of reporting. You have different people that you're responsible for. And it's a different business. I'm not saying it's a better business or worse.
Like a lot of company cholesterol, right?
Absolutely. But, thinking about my dad, because working with your father, or any parent for that matter, is, there's the relationship with someone older, which we all have that, but there's also, it's your parent.
Yeah.
And that's a different thing. And, my dad, taught me some really great lessons, and he was good in that way. And, one of them was the importance of a sense of humor, that it can really break up a tension situation if you have a sense of humor. I remember one time we were at a big insurance company in Hartford, and it was a really contentious meeting, and we were, renegotiating a loan or whatever we were doing, and we get in this paneled room in their headquarters, and there's the head of asset management and the head counsel and the assistant counsel, whatever. So there's eight people from the insurance company. It's me and my dad. And the guy from the insurance company turns to my dad and said, there's 8 of us and 2 of you. It's not really fair. My dad says, how many more people you think you need?
That's pretty good.
And just at this sort of moment, and you know what? That lightened up the thing. And
of course. Yeah, the levity is important, especially in that type of tense situation, like a big boardroom negotiation. What was the hardest part of working with your dad?
The hardest thing is, I think seeing him, as a human, and seeing him fail and seeing him make mistakes and seeing him, because I intellectually, it sounds, frail that I wouldn't understand that, but it's kind of your father.
No, I get it. Yeah.
So I think watching him make some dumb decisions, and to be honest with you, his forte was negotiating deals. Great at that, but putting all the people together and having
the execution,
getting rid of people who weren't getting the job done, and goal setting and all that, he didn't do any of that. So
is that where you think you came in and perhaps add a lot of value?
I mean, I'd like to think that I'm not as good a negotiator as he was, but I'm pretty good at it, and I'm pretty good at the real estate. I mean, that's all I've done. In 35 years, I've built up contacts with virtually every national retailer. I know their spouse. I've slept at their house in many cases. So those relationships are never relationships that he had in the business. He didn't have the retailer relationships, and that's critical.
Early on in Hutensky, what was your your daily routine? I want to say, can't get through an episode here without mentioning work-life balance, but like, I assume you were working pretty hard.
I was working hard, but working hard in Hartford is different than working hard in New York. Like my son's at Morgan Stanley now, and he hasn't had a day off in like 2024. It's unbelievable. But I think that. So I'll say this. So when I was there, my number one goal, my number one driving force was that no one thought I was there because of my last name. They thought I was the best person there. So I worked harder because I didn't want anyone to think I was leaving early to play golf, because I was the same name as the owner. And so that was really a driving force. And then over time, I think your goals change and your driving force changes. And then you get to a point where you're supporting your family, when you want to have the means for your family to do what they want to do and that kind of thing. And, and if I fast forward today, I have very, very different vision, very different goals. Today, I feel a responsibility for the people who work for me. I mean, they're making their mortgage payment every 2 weeks when I sign their paycheck. And I've grown people's careers. People who work for me for 30 years, they've gone from being administrative to like being a vice president and being a member of the shopping center industry. And that feels great too. But I wasn't thinking about that when I started.
If I heard you correctly, so again, especially when you start building a family, financial independence and or providing is the driving force. But early on, it's almost, I want to say acceptance or affirmation, but given that your dad was the guy, it was you just said, hey, I need to work even harder to prove to everyone that I belong here and that I deserve it and I earn it. And it wasn't just something I was given.
Absolutely. But, I think the parent-child thing works best where the child is competent or highly competent. Like if they're not competent, it's very difficult because the parent obviously was competent or they wouldn't be running the company. And then at the same time, the parent has to be flexible and give the kid their space and not, want to control everything. You're not their parent anymore.
Not keep being their parent.
Correct. So I think that it usually doesn't work or it doesn't work often, right?
I was going to say in my previous life as a broker, a large portion of the motivation in sellers, oftentimes a generational real estate was family dynamic and or breakup. And so you just see a lot of family businesses, especially as it gets into the second generation, it tends to fall apart. It sounds like you and your dad managed that effectively.
I mean, I would say this, we had certain rules. Like we never spoke about business at my mom's dinner table. If we had to, we'd go into the next room because it's not fair to everyone else that you're talking about, extending your business day into the family dinner. So, those are the things we did. I didn't want to alienate my mother or something because we were talking about business and, she wasn't really a part of that. So I think you have to manage the relationship, but I think ultimately, and what happened with me, there got to a point where I said I was bringing in 90% of the business.
And the business was the retailers at this point.
Buying deals. And I raised all the capital and I had all the relationships and I was doing all the deals. And if my dad didn't come in for 6 months, it wouldn't have made any difference, for anything, quite honestly. And I had to say for my family, I said, you know what, I can't be 50-50 partners with you anymore. We need to have a different arrangement because it's not fair to my family.
How was that conversation?
It wasn't like you come in one day and, but it was happened over time. And it was difficult, but if you don't have difficult conversations with an employee who isn't getting done, with someone who you want to promote ahead of their time, I mean, those are all difficult things. They're not fitting into a slot. You're not going to get anywhere. So I think what you have to decide is what's the right thing to do and then figure out how you do it.
I have found a lot of people, myself included, when I was younger. Now it's just it's life, but people struggle having difficult conversations. Was this something that, for whatever reason came natural, or was this a developed skill?
I think the hard part is, if someone was your boss that wasn't related to you, you would go in and it would just be about, I don't want to say just about the money, but it would just be about the job relationship. But like with your father, it's like if he leaves the business, then I'm taking my father as being less involved. What is he going to do? Is he going to retire? Is he ready to retire? And all that kind of thing. That's still on my side of the thing. I got to make that part work too, for me to be happy and satisfied. So it makes it far more difficult, I think, because you really not just have a loyalty to, you love the person that you're negotiating with. It's like negotiating with your wife. I mean, do you ever win? I mean,
I never win. Yeah. I don't even try anymore. I just say, what do you want me to do?
So I've won 2 arguments. One was...
And both times when you won, you lost.
No. I disagree in this one case. So one is she was from Baltimore, and I'm from Hartford, and she agreed to live in Hartford. So I won that one. And then my kids both got to be Red Sox fans, and she was an Orioles fan, and she became a Red Sox fan, to be with us and go to Fenway. So I'm 2-98 is what I'm saying, Kyle.
Yeah, but those are 2 big wins. I meant, I haven't lived in Baltimore, but I assume that you probably chose well there, and certainly with with the Sox success over the last 20, 30 years versus the Orioles, I would say your kids have benefited from that decision.
I agree, but she's been great, and she's been right most of the time anyway.
Of course. How'd you meet her?
So she was at a wedding with my parents, and I wasn't at that wedding, and my parents met her, and my mom said that probably the only cool thing she's ever said in her life, which is, Brad's been active in Hartford. You may want to just talk to him to see, what's going on in Hartford.
She knew what she was doing.
So I called my dad and I said, what do you think? And he go, yeah. I'm like, okay. So we went out, and we had a first date, and it was great. And 11:30, I said, hey, let's go out dancing, which was totally bait and switch. That's the last time we've gone dancing at 11:30.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
That's awesome. So talk to us about the scaling of Hutensky, specifically going out, building a platform that source deal flow, building those relationships with retailers, which in this industry, that is so much of the value, is those relationships with the retailers who pay the rents and fill the space.
Right, but I want to just say it's relationship with people. There's lots of people, there's developers who compete against me, who I can call up and say, what did you do the deal with that retailer, or what do you think of this market, or that kind of thing. So, I feel like in building relationships, you should never decide that one person's more important than another one. Like, every relationship can benefit you in a way that you can't even fathom. An architect that you met that was kind of a nuisance, you didn't really want to talk, 10 years from now, they could be the number 1 architect in that market who you need for your project or whatever, or they could know something. So I've always said, be nice to everybody, and any conversation, give it your all, listen, don't talk. Everyone likes to talk. They like to hear themselves talk, as I'm doing now. But listen, hear what they're really saying, and hear what maybe they're not saying that there's kind of behind what they're saying. I mean, no, doesn't, sometimes you go, well, why does it a no? And then you understand where they're coming from. So I think what I've been lucky enough, and ICSC has been tremendous for that, being chairman of ICSC was an amazing opportunity, and be on the board of trustees to meet a ton of people I would have never met. But each one is valuable. And sometimes, like I said, treat each one, as a valuable thing, because you never know where the value is, And sometimes the people that you think can instantly help you are not interested in it. And sometimes the people who, you never know, you just really like them a lot and you like to spend time with them.
Before I meant to ask this question earlier, but so before we move on from the family dynamic, you mentioned you have a brother.
Yes.
Was he in the business too with you and your dad?
None of my family no one else has ever remotely been interested in the business. And so, part of it could have been Hartford, and part of it because they wanted to do this. My brother was a lawyer.
Okay.
My other brother's a marketing guy, a sales guy. My sister lives in Italy. My other 2 sisters, one in D.C. and one in New York. So none of them have ever wanted to go into the business. And that makes it a lot easier.
It does, yeah.
Because, it's my business. It's not the family business. It's my business that, over time, I transferred my dad's platform into my business, which is different than if you have like a factory that's making stuff and now you take over the factory. That's kind of the same business. But in real estate, things change so much. I mean, how much have they changed over your career?
So much. And to what we were just talking about, the relationships change. So a lot of the initial relationships that might have been important or valuable when you first got there, they're retired, they're out of the business, or they're not in the roles, and new people. So let's talk about that transformation, transforming the business from the business that was in place when you got there versus what it is today. Walk us through that journey.
Well, I do think strategy is important. I mean, your strategy isn't always right, and you got to continue to change your strategy. But it's a lot easier to get to a place if you have goals and like try to be heading in a direction, and then you should maybe readjust your goals from time to time. But to do that, so for me, I always, every day or now every week, I do my weekly goals, what I'm trying to accomplish that week, and then I have annual goals, what I'm trying to accomplish that year, and then I have long-term goals, what I'm trying to do over time, and it doesn't always work. You don't get to all your goals. You had lousy goals if you hit all your goals, right? But they have to be stretch goals. But if you have a goal, if you say I'm trying to get from A to B, it's a lot easier to get to B if you're thinking about regularly how you're getting there.
Now, when you write out these goals, I mean, is this an annual exercise for you?
I do every week. I do, I rewrite it. I always do it by hand on a pad, and I just write down my things. And I think about, what I got to do that week and what I want to try to accomplish. And sometimes it's one step towards a longer term goal, that I'm going to get done that week. But yeah, annually, I always do goals annually because it's good to think about, personal goals, relationship goals, exercise goals. What weight do you want to be? How much money you have. I mean, that could be a goal. There's nothing wrong with that. So you come up with what your goals are, and if you think about them and you look at them from time to time, you go like, God, I haven't done anything to get down to that weight. Maybe if I want to be there at the end of the year, I better start working on that. And so I think goals, I can't stress that enough, how important it is to and you should change them. And you should. And my goals have changed over the years. Certainly, my long-term goals.
Sure.
But it's important to have them.
I had someone I looked up to tremendously early in my career. Who two things he said, don't call them goals, call them commitments. Because a goal, it's like, well, I like to hit it, but I may not. He's like, a commitment is like, well, I've committed to getting to this weight, or I've committed to getting to this, this level or this net worth. The other thing he said is like, he's like, you could write out a long-term, annual goals, annual commitments, but he said, summarize them into a couple bullet points, put them on a flashcard, and he said, tape it to your steering wheel and to your bathroom mirror. And he's like, just have it, and to your cube or your office. So he's like, just have it to wear. And so I did that for a long period of time. Admittedly, I've gotten away from it, so maybe I need to recommit. But it was so valuable. Just, you in a different way, you write them down every week. You just got to have them staring at you in the face all the time.
I don't write my weekly goals are more to-dos that get me to my long-term, And, but I think it's, look, the best time management goal of all time is write down the things you have to do, put one next to the most important and two and so on, and then keep working on one until you can't do it anymore, then go to two. And that's the best time management tip there is, right? You're always working on the most important thing, then you're all set.
When, and maybe it's a specific year, when did you really take over the business where you're like, I'm the guy, I'm going to be making all of the decisions, and it's like, and there's obviously a benefit. It could be a financial benefit. There's a certain pride and fulfillment, but there's also risk, and it's like the buck stops with you. When did that moment happen?
In 1994, my dad stood up in front of the whole company and said, Brad is the president. Brad is now running the show. And 15 years later, he really let me do that. So that's kind of what happened is that, what does that mean? He's such a strong man and such a powerful person. Everyone called him Mr. Hutensky. Most of the people did. So it's like, you can't compete with that. You can't be there together. So really it was, when
the late 90s,
when I started raising the money in the fund, that was probably the key thing. So it was 2007. And as you know, you can have all the goals you want. Luck is part of it. So I closed my fund in August of 2008. In
2008?
Yeah, and in September, Lehman filed.
Oh my gosh.
Had it happened a month later, none of those people would have invested. So I was lucky.
And if it had happened a year or two earlier, you probably would have bought some deals that went belly up.
Totally right.
Wow.
So, luck is good. But
good job closing that fund, because August 2008, that was months into what was the crash. So to get, talk to me about that. How did you get people to commit money after the beginning of, because when did Lehman, was it?
September of 2008 is when they filed.
That was Lehman. Bear went down in May, June?
Right.
Countrywide March. So there was already like blood in the streets. And so you got people to write checks after that. That's impressive.
But here's the thing, like most things in life, I really didn't know how hard it was to raise all that money.
Yeah.
And if I had known now, I probably wouldn't have done
Yeah,
it.
there's one of the most common themes when we're sitting with high achievers, and they don't even have to be founders. Obviously, founders is probably even more, but even people who work through the corporate ladder, become CEOs of public companies, there's always this like, ignorance is bliss. If I knew then what I know now, I don't know if I would have chose or could have done it, but it's such a common theme amongst really
But
successful
the reverse,
people.
though, is that not knowing was good because it allowed you to achieve it. Because obviously you did achieve it.
Yeah.
And so not knowing actually is a benefit in some ways. You know, we know too much now. You know if you put
I
your
know.
hand on the stove, you're going to burn it.
You know,
but before you know
yeah.
that, I'm not saying you should do that, but
No,
I'm just saying that you probably take risks then that you wouldn't take now.
Absolutely. So this is, all right, excuse me, September 2008, October 2008, you closed the fund.
August.
August,
So
yeah,
right
all right,
before now.
August. Yeah, then Lehman goes down in September.
And every investor called me and said, we don't want you to invest any money. We don't want to call any capital. We don't want to do anything. So I didn't do anything for a year.
That's what was my next question. Like, did you start buying right away? So then you, maybe it's because the investor said, I don't want you to do it. So now it's middle to late '09. I mean, you talk about the best buying moment. And the problem was just almost no one had the money to do it, but you actually did. You had $100 million of equity. I assume, did you have lenders like who actually would?
The first deal we did is we bought a loan
Okay.
in the Phoenix market, someone I knew really well, and we bought a loan and we became a lender. And that's a good story because I said to my team, I said, we need to have a loan number. You need to like give them a loan number, a reference number, so when they send in their money and all that, they put that on the check. They said, well, we'll call it one. I'm like, you can't be one. Then they know we only have one
Yeah.
loan. What you need to do is have like 8 digits with a dash at the end. So then we send them a letter.
That's
This
funny.
is your
It's
loan
marketing.
number. This is your loan number, and please use it in all correspondence. When you call our 800 number, please have your loan number ready.
Oh, that's so good. And so from 09, 2010, 11, was that when you were
We
very active?
invested. We did stuff. And
All across the country?
But early on in the first fund, probably half of the deals were joint ventures where we took an operator. We weren't the operator,
Got it.
and we provided equity. And then over time, like now, the last 2 funds, we did 100%. We were the operating partner.
So early on, you were in the LP, or was this like a co-GP? Like,
We were the GP, but I was providing equity to an operator, basically.
okay, and
And our fund maybe was having 90% of the deal, and the operator was having 10%. So
And
I guess we were an LP in that regard, but we were the GP of the LP.
yeah, got it. And was this a bunch of different operators, or just a couple key operators that?
We had a couple people that we liked a lot that we did multiple deals with, but to be honest with you, we hadn't been in that position. Mostly, we were the operators, so that was a new business and learning, and having a partner is always harder than not having a partner for
Sure.
yourself. So ultimately, we kind of said that if we lease it ourselves and manage it ourselves and do everything ourselves, we can get better results. We cut
Yeah.
out a fee level, we cut out a promote,
And that's
it's
where
better for investors.
was that a new fund that you raised, or was that still Fund One? Let's call it.
Well, Fund One was probably 50% JV, 50% us
Okay.
as the operator, and then over time it became 100% us, 0% JV.
Going back to those initial investors, the $100 million, you said don't invest anything right now. It's August 2008. If I have to assume that fund did very well, were they very satisfied? They're very pleased with the performance.
Did great.
Yeah,
we
crushed.
Totally hit it out of the park, and they were
And so
very happy. And
You had touched on earlier. I think you had said I didn't know how hard it was to raise a fund or the challenges, but I have to also assume that raising your next one was much easier, right?
it was easier, but my regret in the business, or not my regret, but my observation is you need to. That's a scale business, and if you have a $100 million fund or if you have a $500 million fund, you have more investors. You can go back more. Half of them could reinvest, and then you said have enough for another fund. I only had 6 investors in my first fund, and then it started having 4 in my next one and 3 in my last one. So, we had people investing 20, 30, $40 million, but not that many of them, which is an advantage because it helps the reporting and it helps in relationships and all that kind of thing. But, the bigger fund people are raising $500 million, $1 billion, whatever, and just the asset management fee alone is significant revenue.
Yeah.
And I always was an operator. I always wanted to be in the promote business, not in the asset management fee business. So for us, this felt like the right thing. But if you want to be in the fund business, so now fast forward, we're focusing on JVs again, which is what we were doing before the fund business. Having a capital partner, and that allows you to invest at all deal levels, all deal returns, all risk reward ratios, because you get the right capital partner for each of those deals.
And were you investing for a certain levered IRR? What was your kind of metric?
We promised high teens, like 18% kind of returns.
How'd the first fund do?
The first fund was right about that level. We hit those numbers, and they were very happy. But they don't know what the returns are until well into Fund 3. Do they know what Fund 1 really is? Because you're still investing. So I think the structure for some investors is a really good structure, because once they sign on, they don't have to do anything. I do everything, or the fund manager does everything. You do all the investing. You don't get a lot of reporting, other than financial reporting, and you don't have to make any decisions about the property. Some people like having no decisions. I would guess if, there's other people, when they invest, they want to have a lot of decisions. They want to have a lot of input. When should we sell? When should we finance? Should we do this lease or not, kind of thing. So it's a good structure if you want to be passive as an investor.
You're building this company, you're raising money, you're buying deals. Certainly, there's just so much that goes in. I have to assume, again, kind of like earlier in your career, you're putting in long hours, but at the same time, you have a family, you have a wife, 2 kids. How did you manage those 2 different facets of your life?
There was a period of time. Well, one thing is when I had kids and they were all playing sports, I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be the coach. So I managed baseball for 10 years. I was their manager in the Little League. And I was basketball for 4 years. And I love that. Those were some of my best times, being with my kids, watching them interact with other kids. And as a coach, you can say things to players and to kids that you can't as a teacher or as a parent. Every one of the kids who ever went on one of my teams, I taught them how to shake hands and look them in the eye. And they would see me in West Hartford Center and go, "Hey, Coach Hutensky, how are you?" And look me in the eye. I'm like, at least I taught them. I couldn't teach them how to hit a curveball, but they know how to shake hands. That's cool.
No, go ahead.
No, so I was just going to say, so that part is important. But my wife and I made the decision that, it was family, work, and we cut out, reduced friends, and other kinds of things, and having fun and whatever. I mean, we still obviously got to make time for that, but we consciously did that because it's so intense raising kids at those ages that you can't be good at everything. And we would, not go out to dinner, stay home for dinner to be with the kids instead of, leaving with a babysitter. And there's no wrong or right. I'm just telling you what we did. But we felt that because that time we had with them, that was a bit. My wife, worked for a big corporation, and she stopped working for 10 years, and then she went back to a big corporation. But for those key years with the boys, that's what she did. And I think, you can't be, the best person with your friends and the best person at work and the best person with your kids. You can't be great at all those things.
There's not enough time in a day.
Right. So we chose consciously to de-emphasize kind of friends and
the social.
Yeah. I didn't want to hurt my relationship with my wife, and I didn't want to hurt the kids. That's really important.
It's your number one client.
And work is important because, that you're not going to have, in my case, I wouldn't have a job if I don't keep working, right? So
I understand. How would the players and or the parents describe Coach Hutensky's demeanor on the field?
Thrilled.
You ever get thrown out of a game?
No. You can't do that. You're a role model for those kids, and you can't be living your own fantasies. The idea of a coach, but it's interesting. In my teams, we talked about failure because I said, look, you're going to be out there tonight, and I guarantee it, the ball is going to go through your legs or the fly ball is going to go over your head. And then you have to think about, do you care what other people say, or are you going to run as fast as you can to that ball and throw it back to the right base? I said, people make mistakes all the time. I said, I make mistakes. All the other coaches make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. But it's what you do after your mistakes, that's the key. And I feel like that's something they need to hear. They maybe, I don't know who they're hearing that from. And so, we should talk about that. I was probably the only coach who talked about failure before the game instead of, success.
Yeah, but, that's life. And I'd argue we probably fail a lot more than we succeed. And in order to be in a position to succeed, you typically get in that position by going through failure and ideally learning from it.
Absolutely. But I had no patience at all for bad conduct of my players. Everyone threw their glove, was disrespectful to the umpire or anything like that. Come out of the game. That's it. We don't do that. This team doesn't do that. I don't care what the other team's doing. We don't do that.
You wouldn't like me as a player. When I was a kid, I couldn't manage my emotions, and when I struck out, or I just start crying and just couldn't process the failure. As I got older, I was able to convert it to motivation. But man, when I was a kid, I was.
Well, if you could hit with power to right field, maybe I would have overlooked it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, I was a decent baseball player. Just football kind of became my thing. But let's talk about failure outside of not raising more money or whatever it is as a fund manager. What was maybe your biggest failure professionally that, if you look back, certainly you wish you could do it differently, but perhaps your biggest failure that led to your biggest growth?
I think that, something I already mentioned, which is not understanding that the fund management business was about scale. I fundamentally missed that. I was thinking like, okay, I only want to raise a certain amount of money and that's how much I can invest. And that was a misunderstanding of the business. Anyone successful doing, or most people successful doing funds raise a lot of money. They get to a scale. Mm-hmm. And scale allows you to have more employees. It allows you to, a lot of things, and a lot of things make sense with it. So that was something that I missed. And like looking back, I'm like, how could I have not seen that? Like I should have hired a placement agent to just triple my fund size, whatever. I would have had more investors, whatever, and that would have been. So that's not a catastrophic offense, failure or whatever, but that's just like, you hate to miss strategy. You hate to miss fundamental strategy or not see stuff, right? I think, I don't know. I guess, one, I think one thing is probably that I think I didn't grow the company. I was being conservative. I didn't want to have, always said overhead is both a blessing and a curse, and if you have overhead that makes money, then that's great. Like if you have a bunch of agents and they're bringing in a lot of business, then that's great. And, even if the expense of them is a lot. Mm-hmm. But so I think I would have scaled the business more probably. And now I have great people and, they're pound for pound, I'll put them against anyone, but I have 12 people, and so that does have some limits.
You touched on it earlier is, you said, hey, I always want to be in the promote, and the promote is fantastic. Obviously that's where, you get chunked, but not that anyone, especially in this business, ever a victim, but like sometimes you just don't get to promote just because of the bad timing of a fund or a market cycle. Totally. But the management fees show up, and that is oftentimes how you keep employees through tough times and things. This seems to be feedback from other people in your position that I've asked this question for.
Yeah, I think that's fine, but I think you have to decide what your business is about. I mean, if you have, multiple $1 billion under management and you're getting a point on that, I mean, that's enough cash flow that you don't even need to promote.
Yeah.
And I think some people do think of it that way, that, that's what they're focused on. So for me, I've always liked the shopping center part, the creating value, coming up with a plan, leasing space, moving the puzzles around. That's what's always interested me. And what I learned is that, and the reason why I did the fund is because people have a lot of capital and don't know that stuff, make more money than people who really know the shopping center but don't have a lot of capital. Mm-hmm. And it's not fair, but it is what it is, and that's probably truthful, right? So I think, and I get the other thing I'd say is that my business is heavily betting on me, and I let other people do a lot of things and take risks, and I don't overmanage them because I want them to be successful and feel good about what they do. But if I had 4 other me's as a partners, that could have been a different business, and but. Again, I have no regrets, but you asked me a question. I'm going to answer it.
No, you did. What's your driver now? What's your why? I mean, obviously you've done a lot, and more is always better, I guess. But what we kind of touched on this earlier, and early on establishing your own brand. You're making it not about your dad, but about you. And then there was financial independence and providing for the family, but I'm making assumptions here. You've done that. So what is the driver now? You earlier you said, hey, it's my employees, my teammates, but.
Well, I think that, I think we're on earth to help other people, mm-hmm. And we got to provide for our family and we have to provide for the people that we love, but then there's other people out there who you can help. And, you serve on a board or you give money to a charity and, that's helping people, but sometimes one-on-one, you can help one person, with their resume, or you can help one person with a problem they have or guidance or something like that. And that feels, that feels good. So the people that I have, like I said, there's people who've gotten careers who wouldn't have had careers because of what their background was, but because of me, they learned the business, and I taught them the business, and I gave them independence, and I, paid them well, and they've earned money, and they've earned a good living, and they have money for retirement, and all that kind of thing. I mean, that's a gift to give someone, right? That's something that makes you feel good. And so I think that I think back of the people that I've helped over the years, and I think when I look back, I'm not going to think about how much money I made. I'm going to think about the people that I helped, or the people I got to know, or like walking around this floor, the people that I'm friendly with, and the people that I, some people I met this year, some people I met 35 years ago. But
Yeah, it's like a different type of compensation. I don't call it phantom income because that's actually like a real thing in the tax code, but it's like a phantom compensation. It's a different type of compensation that leads to satisfaction and fulfillment in a way.
Absolutely. But, again, everyone has their own goals. Most people made a lot of money in real estate, never talked to me. So it's just, what is the thing that you want to do, or what is the thing you want? And for me, running a company and having people who are successful, feel good about themselves and all that, I think that leads to more profits for me, by the way, not less.
I agree.
And so I want to touch upon one other thing, which is,
please.
I think, critically important, which is your reputation. And I think, you only have one reputation in life, and you need to guard that. And, I think about a time where early on in my career, I hired this broker to find deals for us. Signed a contract after 6 months, introduced me to a lot of people. He didn't find anything. 3 years later, one of the people that he introduced me to, brought me a deal. I ended up doing the deal. I mailed the guy a check for $25,000, which was a lot of money at the time. And, and he said, well, what's this for? I'm like, well, that guy you introduced me to, I know it's after the contract and all that, but I'm giving you this check because thank you for that. So now, like, last year I was calling someone in Long Island. I said, I don't know if you know who I am. He goes, yeah, you're the guy who gave, Jack Shea $25,000 3 years after the contract. And this guy had been telling everyone. And it's the same thing if you have done something bad to someone, they probably tell more people.
Yeah, maybe I was going to say maybe even in a bigger way.
Absolutely. But, I tell everyone that I come, every time I speak to students, every time I said, guard your reputation. You only have one, and you can't ever turn it back.
So outside of reputation, which is huge, okay, no doubt, what would you say is the biggest common theme of people that you've either worked directly with or that you've had relationships? What would be the most common trait or characteristic that you've seen that's led to success in a professional sense? And then I'm going to ask the question in reverse is, what seems to be the biggest reason people don't get to where they want to go in life?
I mean, I think there's kind of two kinds of people. There's people who want to work for themselves and be the leader, and there's people who want to like work for someone else and be a follower. And it's not good or bad. It just is. There's some people just don't want to worry when they go home at night about, are you going to make payroll or not, or whatever the worry is going to be. And so I think there's room in the world. I mean, everyone can't be running the show. Only, one person can, or a couple people can. So I think that if you know what people's places are, then it's easier to manage them. It's easier to do it. The worst is someone who shouldn't be leading, who wants to be leading and isn't ready to lead, because those people, present an issue. But so I think that people who, you got to be honest, you got to know discretionary effort, right? That's the most important thing, I think. And that there are times where you got to really just get it done. And if it means working on Saturday and Sunday, you're just going to get it done because Monday morning it has to be done, and you're just going to get it done. And I always find that if you have to ask someone for discretionary effort, it's too late. They need to just know what they need to do, and they're going to do it. And you don't even have to ask them. They're just going to do it because they know we're on the same page. But I think that there's so many different ways. First of all, what does successful mean? Like I said, helping people is successful, making money is successful. So it's hard to answer.
That's a great point, and I always think of that before I ask the question. But in a general professional sense, because a lot of people listen to this podcast and they're kind of listening and taking notes and maybe grabbing some lessons from some of the experience and or advice that people in your chair are giving and applying it to, certainly I feel like most listeners like, hey, it's really helped me in my professional life, but it's certainly personal successes, I'd argue, more important. But I guess the question is the answer is whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, my answer, I mean, I think it's really, really important, especially if you're a leader, is to listen. Like I said, everyone likes to hear themselves talk, and that's interesting. But what's more interesting is to listen to what someone's saying, why are they saying it, and try to get to the bottom of it. Because sometimes when someone tells you something, why are they telling you that, or why are they saying that, and really understanding that. And I think that being a good listener sometimes is better than like telling someone what to do or not giving them the answer. So, well, what do you think you should do? And let them say it. And then a lot of times they know and they get the right answer, and then you didn't even have to tell them anything. They already knew. So I think that, look, you got to be good at certain things, and you got to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. You need to know when you need help. You can't be afraid to say, I made a mistake, or I don't know. I mean, the best negotiating tactic I ever do, if we're negotiating something, I'm fully control 100% of it. I can make any decision I want. I always say, you know what, I need to talk to the committee and get back to you, because that gives me more time to think about it, what I want to do. Not all the time, but sometimes. And, don't always, the thing about sales, and you're a salesperson, it's not about making the other person like you. It's about, getting what you need or what you want. And so, I'm gonna listen to what you have to say, but I'm going to tell you what I need to say to get to where I need to get to. And if you don't like me or not, the most powerful thing that I've ever learned that someone taught me is that, no one can make you feel bad. You can only let yourself feel bad. So if you say to me, Brad, you're a jerk, I'm like, I don't think I'm a jerk, so I don't really listen to that. And that doesn't make me feel bad, because even though you just said it, you may be having a bad day. Or I may be saying, you know what, I'm not letting you sell my property. I'm letting someone else sell my property. And you call me a jerk. Now, I'm in total control how I process that. And that's the most powerful thing. Once you learn that, there's almost nothing someone can say to you that.
I tell my kids, don't ever give the power over your happiness to someone else.
Correct. And you only control it yourself. So I think that, everyone has shortcomings. Understanding everyone's shortcomings and trying to manage around them, whatever. But reputation, man. Don't mess with that.
Got
That's
it.
really
Reputation,
important.
absolutely. Any specific resources? It could be classes, books, organizations that you would recommend. Not doesn't have to be real estate related. Obviously, you and I are in that business, but that, in your opinion, either have helped you or would help the audience that you can direct them to.
I think that our business is very transactional. And when you're very transactional, you're very focused on numbers and results and very concrete things. Was there a closing or not? Did the lease get signed or not? And I think that being able to step back and, to your point, think about other things. I found, for instance, Urban Land Institute, ULI, very helpful, because you go there and you listen to ideas. And I don't write down necessarily what the person said, but I write down what it made me think of another idea in my business or another thing that I need to do, based on what they were talking. So it allows you to step back from our business, step back from the transactional, and really think about, the bigger picture and where things are going, or ideas, or what have you. So I think it's, kind of like exercise. You don't just keep doing the same exercise all the time. You got to cross-train and try different things, whatever. And so I think hearing speakers, it could be yoga that calms your mind. It could be meditation. It could be going to a great speaker who's great at something you have nothing to do with, at software, and hearing what they have to say, and you might get an idea about your business or about your conduct or whatever from that. So I think it's doing a much different things, reading books, but different people learn different ways. Some people want to see a visual podcast. Some people want to hear something. Some people want to read it in a book. There's all different ways, and you have to find out for you what works, and what works for you may not work for me. I need to know what my best way of getting things, And for me, I like talking to people. Like, what I would like is not reading your book about you, but talking to you for an hour and asking you questions, and maybe not questions that you even thought were important, but may be really important to me. So I think that spending time with people, like at an event like this, is so important and gives you ideas and ways to think. And, I don't care what you have with AI. I don't care what you have with, social media. Human beings want to be with human beings some of the time. And you can get a different action, a connection. And, if we were on a video call, this is not the same as me talking to you, seeing your, body language and your voice inflection. It's a very different thing. So be with people. That is so easy. Just do that.
And it's in real estate. They always like, well, it's a people business. And I feel like almost every industry is a people business at its core. And so the key of a people business is you got to get with the people.
But the beautiful thing is, if I said to you, let's say, I need some comps, you could say, you know what, I don't have time for that. I'm not going to do that. But if I had built a relation with you, you may tell one of your guys, hey, give him 10 really good comps. So now, because of our relationship, I just got something more. Same thing with retailers. If I call them up, they'll take the time to really answer my question or maybe do some research and get back to me or have one of those people. So that's what the relationship does. People will say, the analogy is this. You're running for the elevator and someone's in the elevator, okay? Do they push the door open button? Do they push the door close button and pretend they're doing the door open button? Or should they put their hand out and block the door so you can get in? And that's what it's all about. Like when you talk to someone, which one are they doing? Are they gonna really work hard, put their hand in the thing to block the door to get you into the elevator because they really want to help you? Are they gonna try to press the right button? Or are they in fact pressing the close button while they're smiling at you?
Well, I'm smiling because last night I was staying at the Encore and this happened to me. I'm in the elevator and I could hear someone, so I stick my hand out. All right, so great news. I'm the stick the hand out guy. And this guy and gal come in, and then like 9 other people come in and they put 8 floors in between mine. And I was like, son of a bitch. No, it was all right. It was an extra minute of my life. But I was sitting there, I'm thinking about your analogy. I was like, well, yeah.
But the thing about, the analogy is sometimes it costs you something to do that, But it is, no, I know, but what I'm just saying is it's about, it's true. Like if I call someone, they could say no. Or they could think about it a little. Like if I said, do you have any properties I could buy? You could say no. Or you could think about it and say, no, I don't think I do. There's one maybe, I'm going to get back to one. Or you could say, let's have a meeting of my top 10 guys and let's see who can find a property for Brad. Those are all the same thing that I did. But because I had a relationship with you, you might
certainly
put your arm out in the door. So that's what I meant, not so much the penalty of picking it out. And so that to me is what the relationship buys you, is that discretionary effort where someone is going to actually work to get you something that's good for you.
Well, what you've been doing has been working. Congratulations, all your success, obviously, and continued. I'm sure bigger and brighter days ahead as well. Can't thank you enough for taking the time, especially at a show like this. I know 30-minute blocks are valuable, and I took up 3 of them, so thank you for that. And yeah, this has been great. Again,
good.
Thanks for coming on.
I enjoyed it. You asked some great questions. And
hopefully our guys will find you some deals now.
I'm ready. That was the whole point of this, was to get you to get your 10 guys have a meeting and get me some deals.
All right. I can set that up. I don't know if we gotta get some higher cap rates though.
I'm in.
Thank you so much, Brad.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah, you too.